All right, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to make a quick video here concer- concerning how much Blizzard has been knocking things out of the park as far as things going on underneath the hood, and particularly from a PvP perspective specifically. I have no idea how things are going on the PvE side of things, like how well balanced DPS classes are and healing classes and the tank classes and so forth and so on. We're kind of doing a bit of a division of labor thing on my end over here. So, for example, I'm in Discord with some of the best Paladin, not just some of, the best Paladin tank theory crafters in the world. I myself am kind of, at least on that list, but nowhere near the top, right? But I'm definitely at the top of the PvP thing. So I'm focusing primarily on PvP. I'm letting them focus primarily on PvE as far as Paladin is concerned. And then I'll make the PvP videos, and I'll let them make the PvE videos. But I basically spent the last couple of days looking underneath the hood. That's interesting. Wolves can be feared, and they're really fast. Looking underneath the hood and just examining all the spell power ratios and the opportunity costs and some of the nerfs and so forth and so on. And Blizzard has been absolutely knocking it out of the park. They're doing everything correctly, both from a mathematical perspective and from a game design perspective. So I made some videos a while ago. This is not what we want. I made some videos a while ago. I want that to go away. No, we don't want to save it. Concerning about the classic World of Warcraft's Jedi curves and the balance between spell power ratios, mana efficiency, offensive spells versus healing spells, and why all that stuff was important. So I made a video a while back trying to dispel the myth of classic WoW PvP being imbalanced. It's actually incredibly well balanced. And when classic World when SoD first came out in Phase 1, I made the Jedi curve video because the spells and stuff they were putting in the game were an absolute violation of classic WoW game mechanics, and they could only lead to really bad things. But there's a video that I didn't make, but was kind of embedded a little bit within those other videos, particularly the dispelling the myth video of classic WoW PvP. And that is why this balance place is, it's mathematically the ideal place for PvP balance in basically any game, particularly an MMO RPG game that exists. Period. Like you deviate from this one specific little area, and you just make the PvP in your game worse. And that specific area has a lot to do with the burst meta. So, for example, in classic World of Warcraft, the spell power ratios and the damage ratios are set up, and standing HP in the game is set up very specifically so that bursting in classic WoW is viable, but it is not guaranteed. So, for example, you can gear in classic World of Warcraft. Most players in PvP have enough standing HP that they can survive a burst from any burst class in the game, unless RNG goes above above average in their favor. Which means if I just stand in the game with like 6,000 HP or like 5,800 HP, in like Nax geared, or even like AQ 40 gear, and I let an elemental shaman do burst after burst after burst into me, it'll only kill me if the elemental shaman high rolls, which they'll have about like a 30% chance to do, maybe a 25% chance to do somewhere around there. But they have to basically get a little lucky on their RNG casts in order for you to explode. If you want to see this meta in slow motion, just think about mage duels, right? What are mages doing? They're turning you into a sheep, and then they're bursting on you, and they're hoping for crits. And if they get good RNG on the crits, you explode. And if they don't get good RNG on the crits, you survive it quite easily, right? And that's the sweet spot of classic World of Warcraft. Now, that's a sweet spot of standing HP, though. So, for example, in TBC, they only increased your DPS by like maybe 50% in TBC, but they doubled your standing hit points, and that instantly that's a deviation, obviously, and that instantly kills a burst meta in PvP. The burst meta dies that day in PvP, and the burst meta basically has to shift to what is known as a chip burst meta, and that is where basically, well, I can only burst for 7,000 damage. My enemies have 10,000 HP, therefore I need to somehow drop them down to 7,000 hit points roundabout without using any of my burst, and then I can burst on them, and then I can kill them, and that would be like chip burst meta, right? Not ideal for a variety of reasons, but just know that that is the logic and the reasoning behind the standing HP meta. Basically, you want to make it so that everyone has enough HP that they can easily survive bursts if RNG does not go the burster's way. But if RNG does spike and go the burster's way, which will be like, 30%, 25% of the time, mathematically speaking, then the person dies. If it's any other way, the burst meta is either too powerful or it's underpowered. 1 second, pause the video. Was my wife informing me of something? The dogs, it's okay. Everything's fine. Sheesh. Where were we? Right, so I just got done explaining the place where you want the burst meta PvP. So you deviate from that at all, and things get a little. You basically kill that meta specifically. Meta might be the wrong word here. It's more like the PvP viability of this playstyle ceases to exist, right? Chip damage burst is always a thing that'll be almost always viable in games unless you've really screwed something up. But yeah. Okay, so the other interesting balance points for PvP, again, this is a video I never made. Well, I kind of did, but I kind of didn't. I infused 2 of my videos with enough of this information that I felt like there was no point in making a specific video about it. If you follow the Classic WoW Jedi curve, you're gonna get there whether you like it or not. But the other interesting dynamic is between damage dealers and healers, right? So if you screw up, there's a magical sweet spot right in the middle, and then you're either to the left or you're to the right of it. So if you're to the left of it, I guess you could say, would be healing is too powerful, and we'll say to the right of it would be DPS is too powerful, or the inverse. So if DPS is too powerful, you end up in a situation where the healers are doing nothing but healing, and they're still just dying anyways, right? Heal, 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 and then they just die because the DPS is outpacing the HPS. Terrible, terrible game design. You don't want to be there in PvP ever, never, ever, ever, ever. We saw that at play in Phase 1, particularly when we were trying to fight like druids and hunters, right? Because they were just doing so much damage that you're just like, I'm just going to heal, and maybe I can out-heal the DPS, but then I run out of mana and I die. Terrible game design because you get heal locked and you just get killed. The other terrible game design we've seen from time to time, but really you'll see it in retail. It's where the healers are way too powerful and nothing is dying, right? Where a DPS class jumps on a healer and the healer like puts 1 dot on them that'll kill them like 3 minutes from now. So take 1,000,000 years to kill them. But they can literally out heal and laugh and like tell jokes at the DPS can't kill the healer, right? Impossible to kill the healer. Typically that started manifesting in World of Warcraft's history due to Arena. But it's actually a really, really bad game design spot for PvP, believe it or not. However, the magical middle ground between the two is achieved, and it follows the exact same rules of the burst meta that we just described. And that meta is that healers mathematically can out-heal DPSers when a DPS is on them, right? However, if the DPS gets good RNG and the healer doesn't really get good RNG, if that's the situation happening, right? If the DPS is critting above average and the healer is not critting above average, then the healer dies. And that's the magical sweet spot. And it plays out almost identically, where you'll have a DPS on you. The DPS will be attacking you. The healer is doing nothing but healing. And it'll be like a 25-30% chance that the healer just dies there, because the attacking player is just critting above average. Like they're 1 in 4 bursts or 1 in 4 DPS attempts effectively double your any kind of variable damage that's happening, like, in your favor. So if you had a 25% crit and you put a wreck bomb into somebody, 1 in 4 of those wreck bombs would act as if you had a 50% critical strike, and of course 1 in 4 of those wreck bombs would act like you had no critical strike at all, mathematically speaking. So it's just like, what the hell. But you can see there's a massive increase in variable damage in like a 1 in 4. Let me actually pause the video and cough. This is actually really bothering me. All right, cough, drink water. I'm definitely getting old over here. Let's see, where are we? We're here. Okay. All right. So how Classic World of Warcraft achieves this this magical state of affairs. Oh, the other thing to note is that if it's possible for a DPS class to get good RNG and to kill a healing class, there has to be some kind of limiter on how many times the DPS class can effectively roll those dice. Otherwise, they're just going to keep rolling the dice until RNG really goes in their favor and the healer explodes. You can see this in mage duels, particularly like Deep Holy Paladin versus a mage, or any healing class versus mage in Classic World of Warcraft. They're turning them into a sheep and they're bursting on them, but then they're eating and drinking, so they effectively have infinite mana, which means that they can just infinitely roll the dice over and over and over again until the RNG goes their way and the healer dies. The only downside to that is it takes a ton of time. What else is there to talk about here? Damn it. Still coughing. It's kind of annoying. Drinking water is not helping. Right. Okay, so how Classic World of Warcraft achieves this is by adhering to its Classic World of Warcraft Jedi curve and being very, very clear about how much, being very clear, Control Z, about a very specific ratio and dynamic between healing spells and DPS spells. It's also important to note that healing spells in Classic World of Warcraft, they don't ×2 benefit when they crit. They only have 50%. And a lot of damaging spells and melee classes, of course, do ×2 damage when they crit. That's also an important mechanic, because otherwise you have scenarios where it's like, well, 1 in 4 times our DPS, their critical damage, their variable damage is doubling, but it might also be running into the doubling healing 1 in 4 chance of the spellcasting healer, and those two things will automatically cancel each other out. By making it only 50% for healers, that's a scenario that almost never happens, right? So it actually makes it a bit more mathematically stable for the offensive spell user. In other words, if the offensive spell user's critical strike chance has doubled, and both healer and DPS realize the situation, as opposed to it, I don't know how to describe it. It's just kind of important. It changes it from, like, I think it's like a 20% chance to a 30% chance. Like that's because there's no, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I just don't know math there. All right. Back to it then. But it adheres to a very specific spell power ratio. So the first thing it does is it makes it damn sure that mana ratios are about 1-to-1 for spell damage. Okay, how do I explain this really fast here? So the Jedi curve, the thing that's really doing is the base spell damage and the spell power ratio. Like that's really what matters here in the grand scheme of things. The base spell damage for spells is that they're always like 1-to-1, like at a base level, butt naked, no gear. It'll be like, oh, you're doing 400 damage on this spell cast. Well, it's going to cost you 400 mana. But then its spell power ratio will be like 60% or 70% or something like that. Whereas the healing spells are always 2-to-1 base ratio, and they're always slightly higher than the DPS, but not much higher than the DPS. And then the spell power efficiencies are either equal to each other or slightly in favor of healing spells. I know that's a lot of blah, 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 but basically what it says is that healing spells are more mana efficient than DPS spells, but you would be surprised at how close the DPS and the HPS is, because the ratios are terrifyingly close. So it might be like Lightning Bolt from a Shaman has a 70% spell power ratio behind it, one of the highest in the game. And Holy Light, for example, I think she only has like an 80% spell power ratio behind it. The ratios are terrifyingly close. You can see it down here, like healing spell ratios are 20 to 30% higher than damage spell ratios. That is a very consistent number. And what this ends up meaning is that by the time you're level 40, my bad, by the time you're level 60, HPS and DPS are very, very close to each other. So if a DPS class is doing like 1,000 DPS, the healer might be doing like 1,200 HPS. And that's what generates this meta sweet spot where on average, the healer can out-heal the DPS, but if the DPS is going above and beyond in RNG, it's not they're not going to out-heal that. They won't explode, but they won't out-heal that, and that's where you get that that sweet spot to generate. Where you prevent them from rolling too many dice is down here. It's in the mana ratios, efficiency ratios. So since the spell power ratio and the healing ratio are very close to each other, it's only like a tiny bit more for the healing spells. The mana ratio divide at the base level starts closing rapidly. So you can see at the base level, it's 2-to-1, right? So it'll be like 400 mana for 800 healing for a healing spell, or 400 mana for 400 damage for a mana spell. But because the ratios are super, super tight with each other, by the time that they're fully geared, it's looking more like this, where if out healing is not possible, then the spell damage class will run out of mana first. Yep. Damage spells in full gear are about 1 to 3 mana to damage efficiency, and healing is 1 to 3.5 plus. So what this effectively means is, like, if a shaman is doing nothing but casting spells at me as a paladin, and I'm forced to do nothing but heal myself as a paladin, the meta is math dictates that we will be in a very specific scenario. And that scenario basically is that the shaman will run out of mana before I do, because the healing spells are more mana efficient than the damage spells. That is an inevitability. And that was one thing that was not in Phase 1 when I originally made this video, and it was really annoying, because the druids could basically just keep casting and casting and casting until the healers ran out of mana, and they died because of that, which is a terrible, horrible violation of classic WoW game mechanics. And just good PvP efficiency in general. So yeah, so the fact that you can in Classic World of Warcraft, important. And the fact that the healing spells are more mana efficient is important, because it means that the offensive spellcaster can only roll so many dice to get the high RNG before they eventually just run out of mana, and they can't sustain the DPS anymore. So, for example, if I'm doing nothing but healing as a paladin in Classic WoW, like actual Classic WoW, not Season of Discovery, and the shaman's just opening up on me with a bunch of spells, unless they high roll on RNG and I explode, what'll happen is the shaman will be out of mana, and I'll still have like 30% of a mana bar left, assuming we have a similar mana bar levels, specifically because of this ratio. And that is actually good, because if it's any other way around, it's bad, right? If the healer is still sitting there with, like, 2/3 of their mana left, that's horrifying. And if the healer goes before the spellcaster goes that's just bad game design. And this puts it in a very nice sweet spot. Also, if the spellcaster is so mana efficient that they get to roll a truly terrifying amount of dice, that is also not the greatest game design in the world. Again, look at like Mage Sheep PvP meta if you want to see what that looks like. The mage effectively has infinite mana because they just keep sheeping you, and they just keep bursting on you and sheeping you and bursting on you and sheeping you and bursting on you, which means they can roll the dice forever until RNG really goes their way. I'm talking 1 in 4s, but they might be looking for a 1 in 8 level of RNG, and then something truly blows up, right? So it's important that they can't roll too many dice. So for example, an elemental shaman, as far as bursting is concerned, has like 3, maybe 4 dice rolls at most, but before they in Classic World of Warcraft, and that's basically a perfect sweet spot. Right. So let's talk about what they've been doing in Season of Discovery, as far as I can tell, and why I have nothing but praise for them so far. So, back when I made the Jedi Curve video, I basically suggested that there were 2 ways to balance PvP effectively in Classic World of Warcraft, right? To get that sweet spot of PvP back. The first proposal was you need to bring the spells in line with the classic WoW Jedi Curve, because that is a sweet spot in MMORPG. There's just no way around it. Hopefully I've talked enough about it so far in this video that you kind of agree with me on this. It's like, well, if we increase the HP, we literally watch burst meta die, and chip burst meta becomes, like, theoretically the way to go. If healing is too powerful, that's really bad. If DPS is too powerful, that's really bad. If things never run out of mana, that's also bad, because you just keep getting to roll dice over and over again. Hopefully you can see why this weird little magical sweet spot manifests. It's the point at which the most things are viable. The most play styles are viable, while at meaning they actually have like a 30% or 25% chance to win a fight, while at the same time nothing being egregiously overpowered, I suppose. So that was number 1, is bring it in line with Classic World of Warcraft. The second proposal that I made was these runes around here. How do I put this? Let's say that we do the math on these runes, and we can tell that the runes are increasing our DPS by like 500. Okay, let's say we can tell that. So I went from a classic WoW character that was extremely well PvP balanced with this beautiful Jedi curve, and I put a bunch of runes in the game that suddenly like double their effective DPS. Right, we went from 500 DPS to 1,000 DPS. That's going to be a terrible, awful, no good problem. The only possible way that would balance out is if the healing spell runes likewise increased healing by 500 HPS, right? Like that would be the only possible way that would balance out. And honestly, you'd have to, that's assuming you weren't adhering to the Jedi curve. If you were adhering to the Jedi curve, it shouldn't be 500 HPS, it should be 600 HPS. Because again, there's that 20% that's not even true, actually. The ratio is 20%, but the Jedi curve says that damage and healing are almost identical. Yeah, it's right here. When you're fully geared, like literally, it's like 1 mana for 3 damage. No, that's not true, because I got it right the first time. It would be 1,000 to 1,200, because that's when you get that point where the hell are we? We're right here. Again, you want to be at that sweet spot where, on average, the HPS can out-heal the DPS, but if the DPS spikes in damage, the healing character is in trouble, right? And that's a perfect balance. 1,000 DPS versus 1,200 HPS. And you could do that in the runes, right? You could just look at the runes and be like, okay, how much are people DPSing right now? Let's change it for HPS and yada yada yada. But then you also have to adhere to the mana efficiency. I'm kind of happy to report that Blizzard's basically done both. They brought a lot of the spells in line with classic WoW Jedi curve, and they've also kind of looked at things and been like, okay, well, we're gonna put healing spells in the game that you can take, and these healing spells are going to give you a very specific amount of HPS. I'm actually kind of interested. What happened was I looked at all the spells in the game and their spell power ratios, particularly on like the new runes and what they're doing, and I noticed that Blizzard has given most classes a very specific number of HPS from the runes, and that specific number seems to be somewhere around 300. It's probably closer to say it's somewhere around 200-ish. But when you start playing with it properly and you start thinking about it from a PvP context, it's closer to like 300. So for example here, Riptide on Shaman, I'll just give a couple of quick examples. I'm currently wearing exactly plus 100 spell power on this gear for playtesting purposes. But Riptide is a new rune. It's an instant cast spell. It's on a 6-second cooldown, and she heals you for about 700, and she puts this hot on you. This hot on you that you're only going to get like 2 ticks out of before you have to Riptide again. Now, in theory, you wait like half a second on Riptide until you get the second tick, and then you do it again. So if you're spamming Riptide, you're doing it wrong. But if you wait for that second tick and then immediately Riptide again, so you can see the Riptide, there's 1 tick, and it's on cooldown. I get the tick, I get the Riptide, right? So you're doing it properly. And if I do the math on this, this is like 200 HPS or something like that. Let me just redo the math really quickly here, just so you guys can see that I'm not crazy. So it's like 700. Also, the spell power ratio on the thing is 22%. For the heal, and then it's also 22% for the hot. But that's 22% total, meaning that the total healing of this spell is 44%, which is perfectly fine for an instant cast spell. Believe it or not, most instant cast spells in World of Warcraft have between a 40% and a 50% spell power ratio. So this thing is perfectly fine. Everything is Jedi curved here, which I really like. Divided by, I think it's 5, right? Yeah, 140. So I need to go 700 plus 280 equals, and then I divide that by 6 seconds, and you can see we're around about 150 HPS, but that's not factoring in critical strike chance, and I'm certainly not wearing in anywhere near as much plus healing gear or spell power ratio gear that I can possibly get my hands on. So you can see that we're getting like 200 HPS from that spell alone. And when you look around, you'll notice that the only other thing that you could possibly take that would heal yourself, because, and we'll talk about that in a second, they made nerfs. So I'm really happy with the nerfs that they did, not just to Shaman, but just to PvP. So basically, I suppose this whole video is just going to be me gushing about how whoever's balancing PvP in Classic WoW is doing an absolutely fantastic job. They either watch my videos or they know what the hell they're doing. And to be perfectly honest, if you're watching my videos, that also counts as knowing what the hell you're doing. So congratulations. Yeah, you're not a good game designer if you're not actually watching videos. And trying to listen to what other people say, whether they have good ideas or bad ideas or not, in my assessment. Basically, just listen to people until you find someone who actually knows his stuff, and then be like, oh, okay, yeah. But Earthshield is interesting. I forget what its spell power ratio is, but she's also rocking around at a point. I have it recorded somewhere here. Let's pull it up, shall we? Should be like Shaman, right? Shaman SoD PNG open. Okay. No, I don't want to save anything here. Okay, so we have Tidal Wave, mana instant, base healing 22% ratio, healing rains doing its thing. Earthshield, not almost no mana whatsoever, instant cast. 54% heal. That's within line of the Jedi curve. Not crazy. Not super low, not super high, very good. It's got 9 charges, but it's got a 3-second proc. That is a lot of plus healing there. So let's see, we got like 310, and then I divide that by 3? Yeah, it's like 100 HPS on the Earth Shield. So you can see very quickly here, and then like what else can the DPSers take? Because again, they moved runes around, right? So it's like, is there a DPS rune here for people to take? And the answer really isn't. So expect just about every shaman and their dog to basically take Earth Shield, right? I mean, like, what else are you taking here besides Earth Shield? Way of Earth, Rock Biter. Way of Earth is actually terrifying, if I recall correctly. And Shock, Taunts, Attack, separate cooldown. Yeah, this is the thing that puts your Earth Shock on a separate cooldown. So this would be your DPS option, or your or you can do a healing option. But you can see here that if I choose the healing option, I'm going to be rocking where's that? I'm going to be rocking Riptide, but Riptide is opportunity costed against some DPS stuff here, and I'm going to be taking Earth Shield, and there's literally nothing else I can take. Tidal Waves, maybe, but that just increases the efficiency of my hardcast heals. Yeah, and then here's the big thing. They nerfed Maelstrom Weapon, and thank God for that. So Maelstrom Weapon used to allow enhancement shamans and shamans in general to basically do what I suggested in my shaman PvP guide, which is greatly reduce the cast time on their healing spells to a terrifying degree. And when you were pairing Maelstrom Weapon with Tidal Waves, stuff was absolutely terrifying. So this is a really good nerf to the overall HPS and survivability of a class. And this brings it in line with what they seem to be trying to do, which is I want the base HPS of a class to be like 300. I don't know why they've settled on 300, but if you recall, one of the ways that they could balance for PvP, let me make sure I'm still recording here, is to identify how much DPS a class is gaining from the runes, and just counter it by giving them healing options through their rune selection that don't interfere with the DPS options too terribly much. You guys okay over there? Okay. Drinking water and coughing? What? Okay. Do you need me to pat you? Dogs are... What'd you do? You drink water back? Okay, I got them. They're fine. Sheesh. DPS, where was I? Yeah, you drank water down the wrong tube, huh? The dogs want me to take them outside, so they're like, Joe, finish up the video and let's go outside. So I'll do that momentarily. But yeah, so they seem to have settled on about 300 DPS. And they've done this for both Paladin, and they've done this for Shaman. And as near as I can tell, they've also done it for Priest as well. And I'm just kind of like, this is interesting. I wonder if this ratio continues at all. Now, if you're a dedicated healer, of course, that number is going to go through the roof, which I approve of course, but is what it is. Oh, a few other things that they changed before I log out here. Mental Dexterity no longer gives a considerable amount of plus healing. So you can see here it says dealing damage with Lava Lash or Storm Strike increases your attack power by 65% of your intellect, and your spell damage, not spell power, spell damage by 20% of your total intellect. They did the exact same thing to Paladin in Sheath of Light, which I also approve of, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the nerf to Maelstrom and the nerf to Mental Dexterity, and I think they moved a rune around or something, I can't remember. Everything's fine. And I've PvP'd enough in Phase 4 to know that 300 plus healing is going to be perfectly fine. It's a bit of a sweet spot where you're slowly dying in Classic WoW, but at the same time, you're not being overwhelmed, which is really good. All right, so let's get on the Paladin and talk about this really fast. So again, this video is just a constant of everything I see that I'm going to praise Blizzard for. Whoever designed this stuff knows what they're doing. Okay, look at Sheath of Light. Dealing damage with your melee weapon increases your spell damage by an amount equal to 30% of your attack power. This is a good change from spell damage to, my bad, from spell power to spell damage, meaning that we basically lost like 200 plus healing, fully geared level 60 PvP. Why do I approve of both of these nerfs to Sheath of Light and Mental Dexterity? It's because it limited gearing options and made gearing very weird. So for example, if I was PvP geared in a full tier 2 suit or in a full Avengers suit, I would have over 400 plus healing. I'd be like in Avengers and have like 420 spell power and like, no, I think it was like 400 spell power and like 450 plus healing. And if I'm like in full tier 3 by comparison, which has no strength on it and subsequently no attack power on it whatsoever, so like a full, like, you know, the best healing suit in the entire game of Classic World of Warcraft, I'd have like 450 or 500 plus healing. So it was to the point where it was like, as a healer, I wear the DPS gear. What the fuck is going on here? So it kind of limited gearing options. So this nerf, despite me not being, I lament the loss as a PvPer, but I'm noting that from a game design perspective, this is the correct call. It means that when you put healers in plus healing gear, it fucking means something. Whereas before, it literally meant you were bad at the game, and the best healing gear possible would be like strength, stamina, intellect, critical strike plus healing. Like literally, our tier 1 suit that they're proposing in phase 1, Lawbringer suit would be your best healing gear in the game, right? Because it has both strength on it and it has plus healing on it. And something like a tier 3 suit would just be kind of stupid and terrible. So I approve of this. It expands the gearing options in the game, which is really good, and it actually makes gear that has plus healing on it useful, as opposed to, you know, whatever the hell else things were like. So things were weird there for a little while. So I approve of this nerf, and the fact that they also nerfed shamans as well. I'm also happy that they got around to nerfing the Maelstrom effect, particularly when they had Maelstrom and Riptide. That was the problem. If you watch my Shaman PvP guide video, you'll notice that I was like, okay, Maelstrom plus Tidal Waves plus Riptide is going to be broken. And sure enough, when I was out there PvPing in BGs, I couldn't kill these fuckers. Couldn't kill these shamans when they were using that in conjunction with each other. Because it's just like, oh, they're basically holy lighting at like, you know, 0.8 second holy light casts. And that's with like 2 charges of Maelstrom and like 1 charge of Riptide. It's just like, fuck off. So that's not there anymore. They also got their equivalent of Sheath of Light slightly nerfed, which I'm happy about. The only thing that I'm not super happy about is purge spam is still a thing. I think it's fine. I'll make after I take the dogs out for a walk. After I take the dogs out, when I'm done with this video, I'll come back and I'll make a Paladin dedicated video. And in there, I'll end up talking a bunch about how the purge spam is annoying, but it's kind of fine. So the way the purge spam is working right now for Paladin is, if I'm fighting an enhancement shaman, I'm not allowed to have seals. I'm not allowed to have Sacred Shield. I'm not allowed to have any spells on me whatsoever. I'm not allowed to play my class. But when I'm fighting an elemental shaman, I can have my seal on. I can have a Sacred Shield up. And the reason for that is because at some point they have to stop purge spamming me and actually cast a fucking spell to do damage on me. Whereas the enhancement shaman can literally just beat the crap out of me while just pressing purge the entire time. Which is a little bit oppressive. But there might be some workarounds around it using reckoning charges, and if you're a Holy Shock Paladin, you have a workaround, and if you're a Deep Ret Paladin, you technically have workarounds, and so it's kind of like, I think it's fine that one class exists in the game that can kind of tell me to go fuck myself, right? And because it's not a hard go screw myself, it's more like an annoying riddle that's not letting me play my class. I was like, all right, well, how do I figure that riddle out? What else is there to praise about here? Right. So I wanted to show a paladin healing really fast. Holy Shock on a 6-second cooldown with Infusion of Light is about 150 HPS. And I haven't looked at the spell power ratio. I assume it's the same, like, plus healing spell power ratio that it's always been. The Infusion of Light does say that it's increased by like 50%, so 50% increased healing and damage. This is a lot of healing, and it does get that double heal effect when it crits, right? So if I activate this and I crit, I can just heal again, right? Holy Shock healing might be a little bit overpowered. But it's still not 300%, right? So, my bad, not 300%. It's still not 300 plus healing or anywhere near that yet. Maybe if I wore, like, gear with a bunch of spell power on it, it would start getting up there. Yeah. So I think it's supposed to do 600 right now. But because of my spell power and the 50% bonus, it's doing like 800, right? I know this for a fact. Sacred Shield, in conjunction with Flashes of Light, especially if you're doing it correctly and you're using Blessing of Light. Sacred Shield with, I call it the dance for Paladin. So the dance for Paladin is I put Sacred Shield up, and then I basically Holy Light myself once every 12 seconds, for basically for the hot, right? And I'm actually Holy Lighting myself twice, and then after you put 2 Holy Lights, my bad, Flash of Lights into yourself, you just press W towards the enemy. And you're doing this like basically every 12 seconds. So when the hot's about to go off, you just cash 2 more Flashes of Light again. If either of those 2 Flashes of Light crit you, you stop, you just stop healing and you press W. So that was basically a perfect example right there, right? So we got to see 2 of those back to back. So in some situations, I'm casting 2 Flashes of Light and then pressing W. And in other situations, I'm casting 1 Flash of Light and I'm pressing W. Basically, if any of those Flash of Lights crit, then you just roll with it. All that put together is about 300 HPS. And this is kind of an important thing to observe, because... Jesus, all right. Let me just, okay, yeah, thank you, yeah. Okay. No, I don't want that. Oh, I'm stupid. Okay. This is an important thing to observe because only a Holy Shock Paladin's going to have Holy Shock to play with from an HPS perspective, right? Every other Paladin, the only healing thing we really got going on for Paladin defensively in Season of Discovery is Sacred Shield and the dance that I just talked about, right? And so it's kind of important that that dance be like whatever Blizzard has identified that they want that number to be. And right now, that number is going to be about 300 HPS. I go look at Shamans and their healing capability without losing too much DPS, and it's 300 HPS. I go look at Priests, and they're also doing about 300 HPS. That number can go above if you gear differently or if you specialize. But, a DPS, yeah, 300 HPS. So they seem to have identified that. So I'm basically happy to report that they seem to be adhering to those Jedi curves. Other weird things that I've noticed, I haven't looked at Druid yet. I'll have to go look at how bad or how good Druid is. But you'll notice that the mana costs are also kind of in line. Holy Shock's not a good example because she's in a classic WoW spell, so of course she's going to be pretty well in line. Sacred Shield at 180 mana is a bit on the cheap side, but she's also purgeable, and Priest purges are like 254 mana, and Shaman purges are 152 mana, so her being 184 mana is fine. Everything's fine. And fine means that it's good. It's good game design. What do I want to do here? What, Shaman? Yeah. I wanted to showcase Shaman mana ratios. Right, so you look at Riptide here. She's like 273 mana for like a 150 HPS. Right? That's kind of in line with the whole Flash of Light thing that was going on, believe it or not. So the Flash of Light are like 140 mana each, so when I'm doing the dance every 12 seconds to maintain this like 300 HPS thing going on, I'm spending 200. I'm spending damn near 300 mana to get the job done when you factor in everything. So 300 mana for 12 seconds of 300 HPS is pretty good. You are a melee class that has to stop and heal themselves, so that should we should be a little bit more efficient in the grand scheme of things, because having to stop and heal yourself as a melee class is really bad. Whereas having to stop... Riptide is instant cast, right? So she shouldn't be anywhere near as efficient. Earth Shield is instant cast, so it should not be anywhere near as efficient. There should be some efficiency cost for the fact that I can do this instant cast, right? Whereas the Paladin actually has to stop his... As a melee class, it has to Holy Light himself, as opposed to heal. As you get the idea. Whatever. I'm just ranting at this point. But this is kind of in line. I mean, 272 mana is not nothing. I mean, I'm spending 280 mana for 2 Flashes of Light. And the Flashes of Light plus Sacred Shield are more mana efficient. They're more healing efficient at 300, and they're more mana efficient. But these two together, right, Earth Shield and Riptide, are 300 HPS. And like I said, there isn't really anything else that you can take noteworthy to really increase that. You can take Tidal Waves, but Tidal Waves is basically the equivalent of giving you, like, Holy Shock from a healing perspective, if you really think about it that way. So these two things in conjunction are 300 HPS, and in conjunction, they're like, 350 mana for 300 HPS, which is perfectly in line with what Paladins are doing. And based upon my PvP experience so far, that's going to be perfectly fine. So it's kind of like they've identified that the amount of DPS that you're gaining from all the runes is going to be about 300 DPS. And so they've made the HPS roughly similar in these runes, at least, so defensively speaking. And then the last thing they've done is they've either buffed the mana cost, or they brought the mana cost of those spells in line to what's the term here? Brought the mana cost of those spells in line so that they're not insanely mana efficient, but they're definitely more mana efficient than the offensive spells. So yeah. I got nothing but praise, because it seems like Blizzard is simultaneously adhering to the classic WoW Jedi curve, while at the same time balancing things from a rune perspective. Even the way they've moved runes around and they've nerfed certain runes, I agree with 100% and completely, whether it benefits me or not, right? So basically that's all. That's what I'm seeing so far, and so far I've basically got nothing but praise. Let's go to Priest here really fast. Priest was a little bit more difficult to pin down as far as their healing was concerned. Pop over here into Stormwind. Yes, sir. So the only thing that Priest really had that was anywhere near mana efficient was healing was concerned, was Prayer Mending is cracked out of its skull for healing efficiency. Power Word Barrier, yeah, no, that's not it. It's, damn it, where is it? It's Penance. Right? Penance is nuts. Let's get it on really fast. But that's fine. So the first question we have here is, she's 222 mana, she's channeled, so at least there's some counterplay. But it's like a 1 second channel. It's like super fast, right? Or yeah, it's like 1.5 seconds. Good luck fucking with that too terribly much. But at least there is some counterplay there. Gotta cough really fast. Give me a sec. Damn it. Okay. I think I'm wearing 100 spell power. I think I'm doing my due duty here. Oh no, I replaced it with crit because we were doing test stuff. So I got like no spell power right now whatsoever. But if you do the math on this thing on like a 12-second cooldown, right? Like those are 600s. Let's just roll with it for now. 600 times 3 equals, divided by 12 equals, it's 150, right? So you can see there's a consistent theme here. What's the HPS of Sacred Shield? Well, by itself, with nothing else, it's 150. What's Sacred Shield HPS being used properly with the Critical Strike runes and blah 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 blah. Well, it's double that. It's 300. Can I get over 300 HPS on my paladin through runes alone and proper usage? No, I cannot. Jump over to shaman. What's the HPS of Riptide? Well, it's about 150. What's the HPS of Earthshield? Well, it's about 150. That's if I play it properly. Can I get any better HPS from the runes without sacrificing a considerable amount? And the answer is not really. Okay, so you're seeing that consistent theme. What's the HPS of Penance right now? Well, it's 150. What's its mana cost? It's pretty goddamn mana efficient at 220 mana for 12 seconds of 150. But then you start looking at other things like, a power word shield. Got a really scary, amazing rune.
I can't use that.
Really? A really scary, amazing rune. What else heals around here? I don't think they don't have that much that heals. Spellcast and smite, flash heal, be instant cast, critical spell casts. Okay, Surge of Light is legitimate. I gotta think about that. Spirit of the Redeemer. Oh yeah, that's that thing. Never mind. Pain suppression is pain suppression. Prayer mending is pretty amazing. Don't know how great it is in PvP though. Renewed Hope. Your heals from flash heal, lesser heal. Yeah, penance. Is that the one that reduces weakened soul? Yeah, okay. Renew heals. Okay, they got the renew heal thing. A lot of healing stuff here, right? But the big boy heal is definitely the other one. Critical heal, protect the shield and target, absorb 30%. Okay, interesting. I think that's it. It's just basically kind of power word shield and penance and maybe a better renew or an extra instant cast flash of light here or there. Where's power word shield? Do I even have it on here right now? Yeah, I do. So power word shield actually costs a absolute butt fuck ton of mana. She always has. She's a classic spell. What do you want from her? I'm trying to think. So, okay, so Soul Worlding. Yeah, costs 15% less mana. Because I was like, it's supposed to cost 500. Why is it 415? She's going to put an Absorb Shield on you that's kind of intense. Absorbing 1,000 damage. I think this... Does that account for the... One second. Does that account for the 15% base increase? It does. Okay. So this tooltip is not lying to me. Interesting. Okay. And gains an additional 50% of your healing power. That's another one. So I don't think Power Word Shield in Classic WoW actually has a spell power ratio behind it. So when Soul Warding says you gain 50% of your healing power added to the shield, that's not additional to anything. That's just 50%, and that's 100% in line with the Classic WoW's Jedi curve. Naturally, it puts you on a 15-second cooldown, and it's base healing because again, I'm wearing like non-existent. I'm wearing like PvP test gear. Literally, I'm like starting gear items. Like, what do you want from me? So it's like 1,000 HPS on a 15-second cooldown with that ratio that's in line with Classic World of Warcraft. Jump over here, pull up the damn calculator. How much you want to bet? I'll bet you anything you want to lose. It's about 150 HPS. Anything you want to lose. All right, so it's like, 1,000 absorb shield, okay, on a 15-second cooldown, divided by 15. Okay, so that's only 66 HPS. Plus penance is like, 150 HPS. So we're at like 216 HPS, and we still have runes available that can increase that HPS. Which means that HPS is probably somewhere in the vicinity of like 300 HPS. So again, they're adhering to this number rather religiously. You have one spell that is somewhat mana efficient, and another spell that is somewhat mana inefficient. And if I put those two together, they're probably it's very, very close to the Jedi curve. Cool. Other things that they've changed for Priest is Dispersion got moved. Dispersion is now opportunity costed against Void Plague. I cannot tell you how big of a deal this is. Now, the PvE community is happy that Dispersion has been moved here for some reason. I don't know why. But I think it's because whatever replaced Dispersion got put someplace else, so they don't have to choose between Void Plague and some other DPS spell. Right? So the PvEers are happy about this change. PvPers are not happy about this change. And I'll tell you why. because now they have to choose between Dispersion and Void Plague. And what Dispersion was doing for them, so Void Walker, I'll summon Void Walker here really fast. I don't know why I'm going into a rant all of a sudden. I have to target something to do this? All right, so my bad. Shadow Fiend right now has like 1,000 hit points, and she's on 1,000 hit points on a 5-minute cooldown, and she basically is like a Crusader Strike per auto attack, but it only lasts long enough. Can I just bubble everybody? And well, they're not in my party, so I can't put a bubble on them. We'll just cast Fortitudes until I shall we? So the Shadow Fiend only gives you back like 50% of your mana. I need to somebody help me Okay, thank God. So if I put a Shadow Fiend on a target, you'll see that if you let it run for it's got 1,000 hit points. Oh, it's not telling me right now. That sucks. But it's got 1,000 hit points. And if you let it run for its full duration, it'll only give me like 50% of a mana bar. Maybe a little bit more. Yeah, like it'll give me like maybe 55% of a mana bar from that damn thing. And that's on a 5-minute cooldown, and that's all you have in PvP if you took Void Plague. Meanwhile, Dispersion is not only a defensive ability, but she, in the first 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 30 seconds of fighting, because the damn thing is on a 2-minute cooldown. Let's get it on there really fast. It's on a 2-minute cooldown. Within the first 2 minutes of fighting, you get to use it twice. Which means she's giving you something stupid, like 72% of your mana back. It's so much mana that if you run into a priest in PvP and they put Void Plague on you, immediately know that you can beat them in a mana war. If you run into a priest and they don't put Void Plague on you, know that they're probably a good PvPer because they took Dispersion, because dear God, are they going to need that plus 72% of a mana bar within the first two minutes of combat, right? So the fact that it got moved is actually good game design. It's actually amazing game design, because it means that the PvPers have to choose between Void Plague and Dispersion now, and so it means they have to choose between one of their most mana efficient, best damaging abilities, versus a great defensive and a huge part of their insane mana regeneration. They got to choose between that, which is really good game design. And then the PvEers are also happy with this, because they don't have to choose between 2 DPS spells anymore. So, in theory, they got more DPS spells because they can take Void Plague and they can take the other stuff. But if you take Void Plague and you take the whatever DPS spell got moved out of here, dear fucking God, do you have mana issues in PvP? Holy shit. You're like a classic WoW Paladin in Season of Discovery. It is the stuff of fucking nightmares. Like, I did some ooming test on this, and it's just terrible. Without Dispersion, it's so bad. So you run out of mana like an absolute like crazy. Part of the reason, of course, is that your Shadow Fiend is on a 5-minute cooldown, and she can be like stunned and instantly killed by just about anything in its dog. So it's an incredibly unreliable source of mana regeneration, making Dispersion your only real reliable source of mana regeneration. But now you can't take any and Void Plague, and Void Plague was by far your most mana efficient spell. Like, I have them over here. I literally put all the mana efficient spells over here. So Mind Spike, I'm not entirely sure what its spell power ratio is, but it hits like a girl, and it roots you in place for a 1.5 second cast. And I just didn't even bother. I'm like, okay, so this thing's just gonna tickle me to death. But she's extremely mana efficient. But again, having to root yourself in place and cast spells that basically do no damage on one of the most immobile, can't catch anything in the entire game classes. Like, Shadow Priests have trouble running. Shadow Priests have more trouble running people down and killing them than Paladins do. That's how terrible they are. They are literally the worst mobility class in the entire game, in PvP. Paladins have better chase you down and kill you mechanics than a Shadow Priest. Warlocks have better chase you down and kill you abilities than a Shadow Priest. Shadow Priests have no slows. I don't know about that. Shackle and yeah, Shadow Priests have no slows. Unlike Paladins, I actually have slows now. And their DPS on the move is all dot-based, which can be cleansed. But you can see Void Plague. Void Plague is she's still kind of mana expensive at 172. But she's like 10 to 1 mana efficiency to damage ratio. But it's a dot, so that's kind of fine, and it has that massive opportunity cost. What was here besides Soul Warding? Oh, it was Vampiric Touch. Vampiric Touch, you might be thinking maybe they'll get their mana back through Vampiric Touch. It's not happening. So the more I look at everything, and again, I haven't looked at Druid, so I'm going to go look at Druid next. But the more I look at everything, it's always like 300 HPS, somewhat mana efficient, but not too terribly mana efficient, definitely within the Jedi curve. The spell power ratios are also within the Jedi curve. When I look at the damaging spells, they're not super mana efficient, and they're also within the Jedi curve. So, for example, and we have it right here, of course, right? You look at the damaging spells. Lightning Bolt is still cracked out of its skull, but when damaging spells have again, it was written down at the beginning of the video. When spells are extremely mana efficient and they have a high spell power ratio behind them in classic World of Warcraft, they're always hard cast. And Lightning Bolt is no exception, right? Even fully talented, she's a 2-second hard cast spell with an incredible spell power ratio behind her. But again, she's 70% ratio, and a Holy Light would be like 80% ratio. So, you know, it is what it is. But look at Lava Burst by comparison here. Lava Burst only has a 58% spell power ratio. She's incredibly mana efficient, but she's on an 8-second cooldown, and she is hard casted at 2 seconds. There's a lot of negatives here. So everything is fine. Even this is a very low spell power ratio for a spell on an 8-second cooldown. Believe it or not. This has a lower spell power ratio by a considerable amount than, say, Lightning Bolt, and it's the same cast time. So yeah, no, everything's fine, ladies and gentlemen. Everything's fine. So whoever's been balancing PvP at level 60, literally, my hat's off to you, because this stuff is actually really good. The other thing that they haven't touched at all in PvP, and I basically have to praise them somewhat for this, is Blizzard seems to be very conscious that they don't want to mess around with any of the mobility mechanics of classic World of Warcraft PvP, right? So they're not giving... so, for example, they didn't give warlocks any ability to chase down people. They kept them as a highly immobile, extremely durable and lethal class, right? If you're fucking with them, they'll kill you. But if you want to run away in a straight line, they can't do anything about it. Shadow Priest is the same story. They gave them no mobility. They gave them no slowing capability. They're the exact same story. If you fuck with them, they're incredibly durable, and they will kill your ass. But if you run away from them in a straight line, they can't do shit about it, right? Throw a grenade behind you, stun them for 3 seconds, run away in a straight line, they can't do fuck all. I'll dot you up and hope my dots kill you. That's all they got going on, right? And you'll notice they didn't really give hunters all that much. Yeah, they gave them annoying-ass trap shots, ranged trap shots that can, like, instantly freeze you in place. But I haven't tested it yet, but all they would have to do is, like, make it have, like, a 0.5-second delay on activation. So it shoots out, it lands on the ground, and it's 0.5 seconds before it'll start triggering on people to at least give you some counterplay. Like, that was all they really had to do it. And I just got so used to the fact that I would see the trap coming in the air and literally just press the strafe key. Like, stop pressing W and press strafe. So I would literally just run to the side, and I would usually avoid their trap 100% of the time. Not the easiest thing to do in the world, especially when you're, like, really up close and personal, because you don't have time to see the trap coming. But yeah. So they didn't really give shamans too much increased mobility, and when they gave them increased... well, that's not true. Since melee shaman is a thing, what? I have vampiric touch now. That's an interesting bug. Huh. Interesting. Well, that might be a bug that never happens. Huh. Alright, whatever. I maybe should have reported that. Weird. I'll have to go report that in a second. what is it? They have, yeah, they gave like greater Ghost Wolf. Ghost ability can now be used indoors. Yeah, that's nothing, right? So yeah, they gave a bunch of catch UCC to shamans in the grand scheme of things, if you want to think about it that way, right? Like they can project their Earthbind totems, but they're still on like a 15-second CD. I have that written down as a PvP note. Twisted Fate, Eye of the Void. Note, buff totems are expensive and kill. Earth, I don't have Earth totem written down. Oh, yeah, Earthbind, 15-second CD. Yeah, and they can be projected. They can use Earth Shock and Frost Shock at the same time, so they can help pin you down that way. But other than that, they're not super. They got the wolves, so they can run faster than normal now, and they basically have a freedom, which is it's fine. Wolves are on a long enough cooldown that it's not really the end of the world. Wolves might be like overpowered right now. It's really hard to tell. I'm kind of looking at it from like a paladin perspective, where I'm like, I wear plate armor and I got like bubbles and shit. What the fuck do I care about your wolves? Oh no, you're gonna run at me faster. Like I'm a reckoning paladin with eye for an eye. What the fuck do I care? Or I'm a holy shock paladin. What the fuck do I care? Or I'm a sacred shield, not sacred shield. Fuck, holy shield paladin, reflect damage monster. What the fuck do I care? Or I'm a deep ret paladin. I can just put vindication on all these things and completely nerf their attack power. I'm wearing plate mail. I have repent. Like what the fuck do I care? There's a lot of what the fuck do I care about the wolves for paladin. I don't know how other people are going to feel about it. But I think with considering the nerfs that they gave enhancement shamans healing capability, I think wolves wolves is fine. They might need some nerfs. But other than that, it's perfectly fine. Yeah, so it's like whatever. Wolfies, go get them, and I'll get the speed buff like right about now. Yep. No big deal. And this speed buff probably has the same freedom effects, so I can't be slowed or anything like right now. Not the biggest deal in the world, to be perfectly honest with you. But it might be overpowered. Hard to say. But I mean, is it more overpowered than Bubble? Like, I don't know. I mean, does Bubble heal me? Yeah, kinda. Do I get to DPS while in Bubble? Yeah. Am I immune to like movement impairing effects and CCs? Yes. So I'm like, okay, so a Bubble in different form? Like, what's going on here? No, so I like it. Everything I'm seeing is very well balanced. I got no complaints. Maybe when I jump on over to the Druid and I start looking at things, I'll start bitching about stuff. Watching mages don't seem too terribly mana efficient. So a big part of the Jedi curve is the relationship between instant cast spells and hard cast spells. So hard cast spells in Classic World of Warcraft are supposed to be the most efficient spells in the entire game, right? And we do that for PvE purposes, because in PvE your primary DPS source is going to be a hard cast spell. The bosses are glorified target dummies. I do have a mage here somewhere, I think, right? Druid, okay. They're glorified target dummies, but they're going to take 1,000,000 years to kill. So you need a spell that is insanely mana efficient. And then in PvP it's balanced, of course, because you had to root your ass in place. So if the enemy just runs away in a straight line, you can only put so many hardcast spells in them before they're out of range again. And if they're melee class and they're pressing W towards you, that's a completely different animal. So that's how that's balanced. And every time I look at hardcast spells, and the one thing you don't want to see in Season of Discovery is instant cast spells that are on a short cooldown that are incredibly mana efficient and they do a shit ton of damage, which is why we're over here on fucking Druid. Where is Star Surge, you piece of shit? Not Starfall. Star Surge. Thank you. Where do I put this thing? I put this thing on legs. I don't know if they moved it. Lacerate, Life Bloom. Ooh, they might have moved it. Really? Okay, so I can't have Star Surge and Life Bloom now. Huh. I think you used to be able to have Star Surge and Life Bloom, and it was kind of fucking terrifying. So if they move that, then thank God. Again, I'll praise that for game design. So let's put it on. Let's see what she does at level 60. I remember very clearly what she did in all the phases. Yeah, thank you. I'll start running. I need my other action bars, don't I? Options, action bars, blam, 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 blam. Do not lock the action bar or it won't give me spells. Where the hell is my summon? Yeah, thank you very much. Let's do it. So it's saying that 6-second CD, it doesn't cost any fucking mana, which is adorable. Wow, that damage has been nerfed into oblivion. Look at this shit. I wonder what its spell power ratio is. Maybe it's still got like 100% spell power ratio behind it, and I would just be like, I'm still just... No, she's got nothing. What the? They nerfed it. Okay, cool. But it costs no mana.
That's still recharging.
Life, yeah. So look at this. Look at this. This is good game design. This fucking Star Surge is doing less damage right now than it did in Phase 1. In Phase 1, these things were hitting for like 600 damage. I was there, bro. I was there. So now this thing hits for like 500 base. Okay, thank God. So you can see they're bringing everything into line, and they're making things opportunity costed against themselves that really should be opportunity costed against themselves. I am happy. I got nothing for praise but praise for what I'm seeing, and the more I look around, the more I'm just going to be praising them. Let's switch it out for Life Bloom. Legs. Let's do the healing test. Let's see if it's 300. Heals the party raid members 40 yards by... Swiftmen now also have friends healing party members within 15 yards of Swiftmen. I'm trying to get the ones that don't really affect your DPS. Life Bloom does affect your DPS pretty bad. When you're critically healed, target with like, okay, whatever. I have no idea. I just want to check out at least one of these, and we'll end the video. What the hell is this? The amount healed is applied quickly at first and slows down as wild growth reaches its full duration. 6-second CD. Okay. Okay, less, and less. Huh. 800 over 7 seconds. Wait, what? 6-second cooldown and 7-second effect. Huh. Alright. So I need to subtract the last tick. 100. 70, 80. Okay. Roger that. Where's my calculator? Alright, so that was like 810, and I need to subtract like 80 from that. I'm just going to ignore the spell power ratio for right now. Divide that by 6. Yeah. So you can see that's somewhere in the vicinity of near enough to 150 HPS. Let's go for Life Bloom. Life Bloom, complete duration, or it's the spell target is instantly healed. So this is like the opposite. So, okay. Interesting. Mana costs. Wow. Mana costs, that's expensive as fuck. That is a fuck ton of mana. It must have a good spell power ratio if it's got that much mana. Alright, let's do Life Bloom really fast. Okay, 50. 1, 2, 3. So that's 200, 250, 300, 350, plus 500. Was that crit? I'll check it again really fast. Alright. 350 plus 500, I think. Or was it 550? I can't remember. I would say 900 and call it good. Actually, let's not do that because I have spell power gear on technically. So 850 over 7 seconds. Instant cast forever. Okay, and there's no point to instant casting it forever. Roger that. Divided by 7. Yeah, add those together like another 120. You can see we're starting to approach that 300 mark. I don't think there's anything else that I can take that really helps. Heals for a target for a shit ton without going into being like a dedicated healer. You can already see that taking Life Bloom is costing me Star Surge, which has some issues. Wild Growth is coming at the cost of Sunfire. Again, this is good game design, people. Tree of Life is coming at the cost of probably a bunch of other DPS stuff and puts you into a fucking tree, which all you can do is heal, which is fine. Living Seed, Gale Winds. No, this is just good. So you can see this theme is consisting. Everywhere I look, this theme is consisting. So again, they seem to have identified the classic WoW Jedi curve. All right, so let's just do a recap, right? They've identified the classic WoW Jedi curve, and they're beginning to adhere to it, which is going to basically put PvP into that magic a special zone where everything is viable, but nothing is completely dominant. They've also done the other balancing thing, which seems to be that they've identified that runes are roughly giving people plus 300 DPS. Therefore, they are making the healing just about every class their HPS that they can gain from runes, while not affecting their DPS as little as possible, to be about 300 HPS, which is another way that you could possibly balance the rune system, right? make them counterable, right? Like if in classic WoW my paladin had 200 DPS and now suddenly I'm in Season of Discovery and I have 500 DPS, please for the love of God, make it so that my enemies are taking runes that give them 300 HPS, and then those two things will cancel out. And then as long as you're not fucking with anything else classic WoW related, you should have classic WoW PvP play out similar to how it does in classic WoW, but in Season of Discovery. They seem to have identified that, and they're adhering to that as well. How do I know this? Because they're not fucking with the mobility of classes all that much, unless specifically they were melee classes who needed their ability to be. They needed slightly better mobility. So we're talking warriors. Did warriors in classic World of Warcraft need the ability to get out of slows and snares? Fuck yes, they did. They gave that to them. Perfectly fine. Did paladins need an ability to, possibly slow people, kind of, sort of, but it's not all that great? And the answer is yeah. I mean, Avenger's Shield is the only slow that paladins need, and honestly, we don't even need it, and we've been doing just fine without it, right? So it's kind of like whatever. Shamans. Well, melee shaman is a thing now, therefore we need to give them a slow capability, therefore, blah, 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 blah. Which is fine. Melee hunter is a thing, therefore giving people ranged traps they can throw out and put a big circle of slow out there is technically necessary, or they need to be able to run faster or some crap like that, because otherwise they don't really have a slow. I think they can still scatter shot and catch people and stuff like that, which is fine. But they're not really screwing with the overall mobility game in classic World of Warcraft, which means that the so-called dance and chess game are going to be virtually identical. All they needed to do was adhere to the Jedi curve of classic WoW and then bring the HPS and the DPS of the runes in line. They've done it all. They've literally done it all. If I made a list of things that Blizzard could do to improve Season of Discovery PvP, I'd be like, here's option 1, here's option 2, here's option 3. They did them all. I was like, yeah, let's just do all of them. And I was like, well, okay. Well, option 3 was do both of the two main options, and that's by far the best option. So they basically went with option 3. That's not even true. Yeah, they just did them all, which is nice. So I'm liking what I'm seeing. Everything I see here is amazing. I am a happy camper. I don't know how things are going in PvE, but again, now that they've spent done all this work to fix PvP, highly suggest that you just have a separation of church and state when it comes to a PvE and PvP. So, for example, if you've identified that such and such a class needs massive buffs to their HPS or their DPS to perform in raids, please, for the love of God, don't just give them those buffs that will be that way both in PvP, open world, and in raid. Just literally make it so that this spell gets a buff when you're in raid. You know what I mean? Like, a Void Plague does X amount of damage under all circumstances, but when you step into an instance content, it gains plus 50% damage. Have a separation of church and state, for the love of God. Yeah, so nothing but praise. This is a video of nothing but praise. So I'm going to end the video here and take the dogs outside. Normally I take them for a walk at 10 p.m., Now it's noon, so they're very unhappy with me. And Deus Volt, boys.